pressure on Forex in that sense.
Like you mentioned earlier, we are at, electioneering period at the moment. And unfortunately, one of the prominent presidential aspirants has accused fellow aspirants of dollarizing campaigns, where dollars is being shared to delegates at the expense of manufacturers and businesses who truly need these dollars. What does this say about us as a nation?
Well, in a sense, people are pretty much seeing the dollar as a de facto currency, isn't it? If they're not accepting Naira. Well, I'm not even going into the, illegality, let me call it that, of buying delegates. But if the delegates are, saying, we don't really want the Naira, we want the dollar, it tells you about what they think of the Naira. And as some people say, they're playing down the country by not collecting Nairas. Let's put it like that. Well, I don't think that is the problem we have in terms of firms not getting foreign exchange. Like I said, that's just a symptom rather than the problem in itself. Unfortunately, we know that electioneering in Nigeria has been monetized to an extent that we feel that there needs to be some what I call campaign finance reform. There needs to be a bit more transparency in how monies are spent during elections, like you have in some other parts of the world. But that's something for maybe National Assembly or the government to sort out over time, so that there's less corruption in elections and less corruption altogether in governance and the rest of it.
Finally, before I let you go, in the midst of all of this, the common man on the street is the one at the receiving end. How much more can Nigerians really deal with as time goes by?
Well, unfortunately, the common man always bears the brunt of any form of mismanagement, whether it's economic mismanagement or security mismanagement or health mismanagement or education mismanagement. People are resilient, unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it. So there will be pressures on everybody. There is, and it's kind of a global thing. The common man will have to figure out a way to survive, rationalize their spending, see what they're spending money on, see if they can manage that, try to see if they can increase their incomes if possible, not always possible, ask for a raise if they can get it, and pretty much survive, pretty much. That's all the common man can really do. Now, I'm not so sure the government can help much about that in this time, but serious and responsible governments, they recognize what is happening to their citizenry, and they help. And I use the word serious and responsible government. So the question is, do we have a serious and responsible government to help the common man? Well, that's a question I would not be able to answer fully. We all kind of have opinions on that. But this is not a political question session. So in a sense, it's a shame that the common man has to, at this point in time, pay more for everything, see their incomes buying less, and struggle through a very difficult time. That struggle is a struggle we all have to face, and there's no hiding there. Unfortunately, those are the lower ends of the income scale bear more of the brunt of the problems we are facing. Like I always say, a true measure of a country or a people is how do they treat the poorest in society. My opinion is we have not done a very good job in Nigeria. In fact, to be blunt, we've done a poor job, and that needs to be addressed.
Petroleum engineer and chartered financial analyst, Mr. Emmanuel Aluko, sharing perspectives with me from the UK. Thank you so much for shedding light on our focus today on the big issue.
You're welcome.
We truly appreciate you.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you. This is just the first segment of the program. After the news update, we will be expanding the conversation. Please join us again.
Good evening and thanks for joining me on News Update. My name is Remy Allen. Common entrance examination into Ondo State Public Secondary Schools hosts tomorrow at designated centers. Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, Ondo State, Mrs. Lola Muda, through the Head of Information Unit, Olaoluwa Meshak, said the placement examination would hold across 18 local government areas of the state by 9 a.m. in the morning. Mrs. Amuda enjoined parents and guardians to ensure that their children and words get to the examination centers early in the morning as accreditation of candidates begin by 8 a.m. All candidates are to come to the examination centers with their registration slips and writing materials. The Independent National Electoral Commission has extended the ongoing continuous voter registration indefinitely. The exercise was initially scheduled to end June 30. INEC National Electoral Commissioner and Chairman Information and Voter Education Committee, Festus Okoye, said all resident electoral commissioners and electoral officers have been directed to continue with the exercise pending further directives from the Commission. Okoye said the Commission had consistently reiterated its resolve to continue to provide electoral services to Nigerians by registering all eligible persons. President Muhammadu Buhari has described the attack in Shiroro local government area of Niger State as a direct assault on Nigeria, which will not go unpunished. He condemned the attack by bandits on a mining site in the state in a statement by Senior Special Assistant on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu. Apart from the attack, which reportedly left 13 policemen and civilians killed with several missing, including 4 Chinese nationals, the terrorists also ambushed a team of soldiers who responded to a distress call. The president in the statement said the atrocity only serves to further strengthen citizens against their terrorists, adding that Nigeria is united in obliterating these demons. The president, who assured victims of the attack of justice, said his administration was working hard to bring perpetrators of heinous crimes in the country to book. A federal high court in Abuja has ordered the release of the official details of David Nwamini to former Deputy Senate President Ike Ekweremadu and his wife, Beatrice. Justice Ian Ekwo, who gave the order in a ruling, directed the Nigeria Immigration Service, NIS, the National Identity Management Commission, NIMSE, and 2 commercial banks to release Nwamini's details in their possession to the couple. This followed an originating summon filed by Ekweremadu and his wife through their counsel, Adegboyega Awomolo. The couple are being detained by the United Kingdom authorities over allegations of conspiring to bring a child to Britain for organ harvesting, with Nwamini said to be the victim. Following the arrest by the London Metropolitan Police, the duo appeared before a UK court which ordered that they should be remanded in custody till July 7 while investigations continue into the allegations against them. Although the Met Police said Nwamini was 15, the NIS said it issued an international passport indicating age as 21 after due process. In a bid to clear his clients of the allegations, Awomolo approached the court in Abuja seeking an order directing the NIMSE to produce a certified true copy of the biodata of David Ukpo Nwamini. And that's news update. But before we go, the big issue continues after now. Please do stay with us. Good evening.
You're welcome back to the big issue. Our focus today is escalating forex and its implications on trade, income, and the common man's economic stability. As led by a chartered financial analyst with cognitive experience in Forex trading. I'm talking about Mr. Emmanuel Aluko, who joined us via Zoom from Chelmsford, United Kingdom. On the panel session, I have with me today Mr. Olaoluwa Bankole, an economist and a legal practitioner. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have Mr. Olalekan Olajobi, who's a frequent guest here today. Thank you so much once again.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great. We heard, the perspective of Mr. Aluko. One of the key things he talked about is the talk of the need to diversify our economy. And then administration after administration since independence, we have been talking about this. Do you think, I'll start with you, Mr. Bankole, that we have been walking the talk, or it's all about talk all this while?
I believe that, once again, thank you for having me. Let me also say that I'm on all for with the perspective of the leader discussants. What he has said is nothing but the truth. And let's situate this in a proper perspective. Our problem is basically low productivity. The economy has not been productive. In the course of this program, if we have the opportunity or the time to look at why are we not producing, what are the reasons for our low productivity, we're able to talk about that. But coming to your question about the need for diversifying our economy base, well, over the year, people have been talking about the need for diversification. It is not just as if we are just hearing about what is diversification. Our leader has been talking about it for quite some time. Unfortunately, we have not been able to walk the talk. So it has always been a motion without movement as far as the issue of diversification of our economy base is concerned. Don't forget that sometimes in the 70s, the question was that, what people were saying then, that the problem of our country is not about resources, it's not about money, but how to spend it. Unfortunately, such resources, the quantum that we have in those days, if we have used it to diversify our economy, will not be saying what we are saying today. So I still believe that we have not walked the talk as far as the issue of diversification of the economy is concerned. And essentially, these are the problems that is affecting the escalating cost of the forest that is being talked about. For instance, it's just a basic economic principle that, the issue of demand and supply relationship. As we have it today, our balance of trade is negative. If you look at our external reserve, it's in quandary. So these are some of the reasons that is affecting the issue of value of naira. And so if we have enough time, we can actually interrogate some of these issues.
Yes, I can see you were smiling when he was talking.
Yes, practically we see that Nigerians, one of the basic issue about the discourse is that people are not available and are not opportune to have basic information about economics. Everybody goes out there to work. Nobody actually cares about the worth of what you're working for, what comes into your hands, and what is the purchasing power of that unit of currency called the naira in terms of what you have used it to purchase. What is the marginal propensity to consume, marginal propensity to save, and even invest. These are many more the issues we have on our hands in Nigeria, and because of that, we are now talking about the unit of currency of another country. What's happening to naira in those days that he has mentioned, we found out that it was almost 1-on-1, even if not less than. But today, reverse is the case. We have retrogressed about 600% downward slope, and this, to a certain extent, is showing to what extent the economy of this country is. But most importantly, we have to know that most countries model their economy on the basis of how the principles of that economy that they are actually going to practice, model it after. And because of that, we have seen so many countries with which we had independence together with before now, and they have, leapfrogged into the economics of the world, whereby they are competing favorably in the globalized economy today. An example is China, of course, and we always make mention of that most times. Even with their large population, we still see that because of the human development capital, their capital development rather, that they have put in place, it is easier for them right now with almost 1.6 or 7 billion people on the face of the earth to be able to have an economy that is grown and is modeled to a space whereby the people of that country they have potentials in terms of development of the resources they have. One, they are competing globally in the whole world right now. They have made use of that volume of population, and in the last 10 years, they have been able to move about 100 million Chinese, from poverty into wealth. And this has only happened because they have closed their economy and they decided to, fashion it and model it according to the economy with which they have studied their environment and their people to be. But ours now, I remembered in those times when we were talking about in 1985 when the issue of the structural adjustment program came, and it was a model, that was fashioned at that time by IMF and World Bank for us to make sure that at least we diversify the economy, we reduce poverty, we try as much as possible to improve on our external and international trade, and so on and so forth. But we found out that was in the last almost 40 years. What has become of those principles? We were supposed to model it after them, but what is even the kind of economic system Nigeria is practicing? We need to ask ourselves further to know that dollarization of all the things, because right now in the old world, it is clear that dollar is just the unit of currency to contend with all over the world. So it's not even about the naira per se, but all the indices that we need to put in place in terms of the rate of inflation, in terms of the balance of trade, the balance of payment, and so on and so forth. All these are indices that we need to put in place to understand. But do we even have data? Do we even have statistics? Sometimes they come up with statistics that are not even
You
clear.
wonder where they're coming from.
So Nigeria has so much on its hands right now, and all these things borders to down to leadership. Because the truth of the matter is that in a country, economy and the prosperity of the people of that country matters. Not in a country right now where we have gone out borrowing up to a point that even, as it is said last week or so by the auditor, the accountant general, that they are borrowing to pay salaries. The recurrent expenditure itself is weighing so much down on the national income. And if that is the issue, what are we now talking in terms of a condition where we have a country whose unit of currency over the time, in terms of the GDP all over the world now has increased to almost 20 to 23 trillion dollars. I'm talking about the US and Chinese following up. So ours in terms of what they have generated in terms of their GDP, ours is in terms of borrowing. Because right now the DMO has stated clearly that our debt profile has gone beyond almost 40-something.
All right, you started off by saying that many people do not really know the economics around all of this. But I tell you that the common man on the street at least knows that whatever he used to earn, and is still earning, by the way, cannot purchase, or he could purchase. I'll share a quick one with you. I would normally do my groceries every month. My children noticed that, Mommy, the carton for the groceries has gotten smaller. What happened? And I said, oh, you noticed? That's good. Because you should know that the prices have gone higher. There's no room for wastage. So the common man on the street knows that it is biting hard. They might not know the figures. They might not know what the inflation rate is saying, but they go to the market.
Unfortunately, what I mean with what I said is that the people that actually bear the brunt is the common man on the street, because he's the one that relates directly with the market. In fact, they are used as tools for measuring the forces of demand and supply. But the truth about it is that as much as possible, even when you know that times are biting hard, there are reasons to ask why. There are reasons to ask that, okay, what's the percentage of it? What you have given me right now, I know for free that the commonest essential food, for instance, because we have a rising cost of inflation in terms of food, and all the allies of food production. We know that right now it has even gone to about 18%, even, which is much more than the average inflation that we have on some other items. So it shows that the rate at which the inflation is biting on the people, the purchasing power. Because the money, okay, right now we know that they clamored for increase or increment in the minimum wage or so. Let's assume most of this is being paid. Why is it that even with that increase, the purchasing power of that money is buying just less goods? And even, not only that, it has no value at all because the naira is devalued and weakened. So it is to tell you now that our people must be able to understand the dynamics of this simple economics. Yes, it's biting hard, but why is it biting hard? What is the ratio of productivity, like Mr. Bankole has said? How is it, are we ready as a country and our people to look into it basically in a country where you have most of the people depending on what government does. And government itself would not, encourage people in terms of how to increase the GDP. Look at the interest rate, for instance. Look at the the medium and the small scale industry. There are, and so on and so forth. You find out that most of these indices are not there, and because the gross domestic product, which of course is the major indicator of measuring how a country has developed in terms of goods and services that is sold within the country and outside the country, ours is not so. So the percentage has gone downwards.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Bankole. I see you want to react, but nevertheless, I want to ask this question. You said if we had time, we have time. Why is it that Nigeria is the way it is? We're not. You said we're a low producing nation. Are we even producing anything as it is?
Thank you very much, ma. Let me now elaborate on that. Now, all other issues that has been pointed out, they are more or less like a symptom. The major issue is that we have low productivity. For instance, talking about the value of naira that is depreciating against the value of dollar, what it simply means is that we are the dollar that we are getting is lower. We are not exporting. If we are exporting, then definitely people from abroad, they will come here with their dollar to buy, then our naira will be strengthening. But what we have now is an economy that is import dependent. Now, if you look at recently, or about 2 years ago, an international organization carried out a report known as Africa Infrastructural Diagnostic Report. That is, they look at all the countries in Africa. They want to look at the infrastructure, the gap in the infrastructure in the country in Africa. Of course, when it got to the level of Nigeria, you and I know what the result would be. Now, it was at the end of the day, the report now said, for Nigeria to be able to meet up with its infrastructural deficit, that consistently for a period of 10 years on an annual basis, that Nigeria will require about $14 billion consistently on every year for 10 years for us to be able to, fix the gap in our infrastructural deficit. Then, alongside that one, all the subnational government, meaning all the states in Nigeria, put together on an annual basis, they must also be putting $3.2 billion consistently for 10 years in the infrastructure that is within the level of the state. Of course, you and I know that this cannot be met with the national budget. There is no resources within the national budget, and the state budget cannot fix the gap. Now, look at the energy sector. The electricity, the power. Most of our industry now, they are run on generator. Those industries that are existing, they are run on generator. Like we
all know the cost of diesel.
The cost of diesel. Now, so these are some of those things that if we are able to fix the problem we have in the energy sector, I can tell you that our GDP, we can double it within 2 years. If we are able to fix the challenge we are facing in our energy sector, our GDP, we can double it within 2 years. Unlike that, unfortunately, that is not happening. We are not seeing that happening now because we are still...
Rather, we're experiencing more collapse.
Collapse in the national grid. And so, if you are now talking of making sure that our GDP increase, that people are gainfully employed, we must be able to fix the power sector. Now, with the challenge in the power sector, we discover that most of the industry, they are closing up. They cannot run.
They are moving to other
countries where these things are readily available. And now, if that is happening, it then means that we cannot be able to employ some of our youth. Is it not an irony that in the country whereby we are always talking of people that, millions of people that are not gainfully employed, and at the same time we are talking of low productivity? So we need to fix this infrastructure. And the situation we find ourselves in Nigeria now is more like a catch-22 situation. My brother has talked about the quantum of debt that Nigeria is bearing now, such that taking more debt is no longer an option, it's no longer feasible.
And we have been told that we will continue to borrow.
For instance, now as of today, the debt revenue ratio is over 90%, meaning that at the level of the federal government, out of every 100 naira that federal government receives as a revenue, 90 naira is used to service debt. So these are some of the challenges. Now we are just talking about energy. Power is not just, when we talk about our infrastructure, it's not just about that one alone. If you look at our road transport system in Nigeria today, we have 195,000 kilometers of road. Out of this 195,000 kilometers, only 60,000 kilometers are paved. And even the 60,000 kilometers that are paved, most of them are in a state of disrepute. So, and that is why when you talk about, because sometimes some people will say that some of the food that are produced in the country, they are not imported, that they are not dollar dependent. Why are they expensive? The simple reason is that it costs a lot to bring all of these products from farm or from every other part of the country to where it is needed. And so most of what we have in terms of increase in the price of food is more or less known as a cost pull inflation. Because if whatever cost that you have incurred in producing certain item, you are going to factor it into the price of that product, and that is why that even those things that are produced locally, the price has gone up. Now you also look at the issue of insecurity in the country. If you look at ASIS, they are the food basket of the nation. They produce a lot because of the insecurity in that area. You discover that even in the southern Nigeria here, you discover that most farmers they are not comfortable. They can't go to farm to produce. And so when demand is more than supply, that is, if what is supplied is less than what people want, the price will naturally goes up. So these are some of the challenges that we have found ourselves as a country, and it is now time for government to now sit down to look at what are the options available. For me as an economist, I won't subscribe to government, especially federal government, taking more loan now, because as of today, the debt to revenue ratio is over 90%. So if out of 100 naira that the federal government realize we are using 90 naira to service debt, then that is no longer an option. So there are other options that maybe probably government can also look at into. For instance, we have the issue of build, operate, and handover. Some of these roads that are very, 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 viable, government can give to private sector for them to look at it, let them do it, and you don't need for some time to recoup their whatever investment they have put into it. That is that. Then we also have this issue of tax incentive. Government can decide that some of these big time company, government can give them some tax holiday so that whatever they are supposed to use to pay in form of tax, they can use it. We have seen Dangote doing that in some part of the country. Then one other thing that we have been talking about, which government needs to take serious, is this public-private partnership. Government must be able to handshake with the private sector in terms of public-private partnership. However, I will insist that we must have a clear framework that will give the duty and responsibility of government and the private sector that is collaborating with government in terms of public-private partnership. Because most of these days, what we see is people building a portfolio, private partnership. They will come, they will take so much from government. At the end of the day, we didn't see them again. So we must have a clear framework on all of these things. Then one other thing, lest I forget, that I also want to talk that is also affecting the value of naira is the dollarization of the economy of this country. Now, recently we are aware that when some of the major political parties were doing their convention, we had this idea that people are giving the dollars, paying dollars. So
we moved from the
aside from the legality involved. I know that as a lawyer, I also know that relevant section of the Central Bank Act of 2007 make it that naira is the legal tender in this country. For God's sake, it is there in the Central Bank Act of 2007 that the naira is the legal tender. That whatever transaction that is going on within this our own economy here, we must use naira. I'm also aware that there are some institutions, some of these elite institutions that are now requesting for people to be paying dollar. Even some real estate firm, they are now asking. These are what is putting pressure on naira. Whereas the dollar that is coming to the country is very, very low. The little one that we have, we cannot deploy it into productive use. So these are some of the things that government actually has to look into. Otherwise, the economy collapse on our head. God forbid.
I'll come to you, Mr. Olajobi now. It's been like 23 years of our democratic, experience, and like he said, these are issues that have been there. Electricity. In fact, before this government came in, they said something about it's not being rocket science to actually fix it. But we're still where we are at the moment. Year in, year out, administration after administration. Is it that it's a function of we're not having the right policies? Or is it that we're having round pegs and square holes? Or what is it? And then the fact that many would tell you it's not that we don't have the human capital, because when Nigerians step out of this environment, they do great things. Why doesn't it seem to reflect here in Nigeria?
Going by the analysis that you have given right now, it's clear that we have had, since 23 years that you mentioned, I think about 4 or 5 presidents or so, and they have put so much, deployed so much efforts and resources into our energy sector, which has yielded no result. As I sit down speaking with you right now, the national grid fell 6 times, this year. That's about the 6th time is the grid is falling, and that we have low. In fact, one is expected that Some places in Nigeria will be on blackout as we speak. It is to tell you the trend at which we have retrogressed in terms of finding a lasting solution to our energy sector. It must be clearly stated at this point that if that part of the development of the economy is not looked into properly, we might just be chasing that goose, you know, and of course we won't have any result. Apart from what you have asked me again, you know, because they are linked together, and we can put that in terms of what infrastructure is. Consider what even inflation we have talked about. There's what we call the energy cost inflation right now that is going on most of the things that we produce, the goods and services. And when you factor that, it becomes a great overhead. And because of that, you see that even investment that we are talking about, you know, is not forthcoming because nobody wants to invest in an environment whereby you will factor in energy cost, and at the end of the day, you know, the whole cost implication is not even yielding any profit. And for a businessman who comes into play, wants to maximize profit. So I think we have not really modeled ourselves on policies that are implementable by people who modeled them, and at the end of the day shift grounds along the line, because what we do most in Nigeria is politics more than governance. And when that happens, you know, successive governments are looking at the way of just taking power, but not diffusing that power to the situation where every term they carry in the Nigerian setting would have gains for what they are supposed to have gotten. The energy sector at this moment, yes, quite jokingly, they said one of the candidates of these political parties out to Egypt right now to source. You know, we're talking about Egypt right now with their population and all they have. They have been able to generate more megawatts in a way that they don't even need so much. So they have gone to understudy to find out, well, what is actually wrong with Nigeria with less than 200 million populations or so, and up till now we are unable to have
to still fix it.
In fact, in my own senatorial district now, I'm able to tell you that in the last 13 years, it's unfortunate light has you know, eluded our people, and the whole place is there. So what kind of investment? And there are
what is being done regarding that?
That's where you have bitumen, that's where you have sea, that's where you have all these mineral deposits that if exploited, because they're exploitable, if exploited with energy coming into play, it will transform and be a catalyst of economic development.
Let me quickly ask Mr. Bankole.
I don't know if you just allow me to say something regarding what they have just said. I believe, because your question, we were talking, probably we have not gotten the policy right and all the rest. I believe that
I was asking.
You were asking. I believe that, yes, we have issue with the policy, and that is the truth of the matter. For instance, in this country, and my prayer is that when the election that is coming up next year, we really need a leader that have character, that have courage and competence. Now, what do I mean by courage? You know, there are some hard economic decisions that we government need to take, unless we continue to deceive ourselves. Now, look at the issue of electricity. Yes, it has been, we have brought some private sector there, but we still have some issue there that government is still dilly-dallying. For instance, there's what is known as cost recovery tariff. What we are paying today for electricity, these are the things that our people will not want to hear, but we need to face the fact. Some of this talent that we're having in our economic sector is not something that we can just shot. There's no silver bullet that we will shot and the problem will solve. There are some hard decisions that we need to take. Now, we need to look at the issue of what is known as cost recovery tariff. For the private sector, for them to bring their money into that sector, they must be guaranteed that whatever that has been invested, they'll be able to recover their money. The truth of the matter is that what is being paid today in time of tariff for the power electricity, is it the cost recovery? Can the private sector that is investing their money, can they recover the cost through those tariffs that we are paying? If no, then it means that we need to take a second look. For instance, and it's like we are shooting ourselves in the leg. Most of us these days, we buy petrol in addition to whatever we are paying for the electricity. So if we are agreed that let us look at a tariff that is cost recovery and with a little margin for the private sector, at the end of the day, we will be better off than what we are paying now, and at the same time,
Nigerians will ask, but how are we sure that if they pay more, they will actually get the service for what they are paying for?
It's about potentiality and actuality, but I think in most cases, when you have policies or policy framework that are working and are workable, you don't have to wait until the government, what they should have done basically is to provide those infrastructures, knowing fully well. They talked about BOT, for instance, you know, build, own, and, you know, transfer. For instance, when all those infrastructures are on ground, why won't you pay your tax? and the revenue too, when you know that, that's being used to maintain whatever services is required of you, you know that the burden is on you to do that. And even when you fault or you default in most cases, you are penalized by the law. So what is important is that when the government knows, you find out that most of these corporations at the time were privatized. And it's one of the problems we have right now, because look at the energy sector, the privatization till tomorrow. The problem is not that we don't have generation of all these power resource we have, but what about the distribution and the transmission? Here is a bottleneck till tomorrow. I'm telling you now that the generation itself is saying that they are owing them 1.6 trillion naira, that the federal government is owing, you know, after they have done the privatization and all that. I think a government that is serious and responsible at this moment, if they come into play, must reassess most of these basic corporations to see if there are things that needs to be done, if there are debts to be paid, in fact, they can renegotiate most of those privatized firms in a manner that they will be functional, they will produce the utility that people deserve. Otherwise, we would continue to see that when you come and there are already bottlenecks, there are hurdles, there are obstacles, which of course has to do with policies that have already been formulated before, you know, implemented by those governments, and you are coming on board as a new person, you might be having a lot of roadblocks that will allow such policies, you know, to see the light of the day. So in terms of electricity, for instance, good roads, these are the two major things that I know that if we put Nigeria on that fast track to be able to achieve this, in no time, there will be an increment in terms of other aspects or indicators that will make life and the standard of living better for the Nigerians.
Okay, Mr. Bakare, still talking Forex, the Central Bank of Nigeria has revealed that it will stop the sale of foreign exchange to banks by the end of the year. The CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele, actually said that banks must begin to look for ways to source their Forex from export proceeds. As an economist, what would be the import of this?
Well, I believe that the CBN governor, for him to have said that, he must have information even that is beyond what we have here. And I can only pray that it will be good for the system. But then if previous experience is anything to go by, I think it also called for concern. For instance, you discover that there was a time that the government said that the BD, Bureau de Change Operator, that they will now go and source their dollar from just like any other person, that they will not be giving them at the concessionary rate. We know the implication. In fact, ever since, the value of Naira has depreciated more. And so what I'm saying in a sense is that if that approach is such that it will make it difficult for the bank, commercial bank, to get dollar, the implication is that the price will go up. There is no magic about it. So I don't know.
Prices will go up again.
It will go up. So it means that the value of Naira will continue to depreciate. Any obstacle for the bank, for the commercial bank to be able to source for those dollar forex, if the obstacle is there and they cannot get it, at least at the level they were getting it from the CBN, the implication is that it will be more difficult. People will continue to be looking for this dollar, and as they are doing that, the price will go up. And if I can also talk about this issue, for instance, because even the portfolio investors, people that are coming to invest in Asian or not, because of what they have seen, that the value of Naira is continuing depreciating, so they are now afraid. Even locally, I can tell you, there are people in Nigeria today that even they have Naira, they want to convert it to dollar. So because, you know, it's one of the characteristics of money is that it's a store of value. But when you now have this type of inflation that we're having in our country today, that the value of Naira is going down consistently, it's no longer a store of value. Meaning that your 1,000 Naira today is not 1,000 Naira tomorrow. So those people that have access to dollar, they will want to convert their Naira into dollar for them because they believe it's a store of value. In fact, they know that after some time, maybe 3 weeks, 2 weeks, the value will have appreciated compared to Naira. So what we need to do as a country is to ensure that all of this infrastructure that we are talking about, we cannot do any magic by increasing our productivity without addressing some of this infrastructure. If we're able to address them, then we can start to be more productive. Then even look at our agricultural sector. The major sector that can transform this economy today is agriculture. We have the manpower, we have arable land. What are we doing? What is our policy in agriculture? Are we achieving the desired goal? Centuries ago, Adam Smith talked about the issue of comparative advantage and absolute advantage. If you look at our country today, the sixth zone of this country, the sixth political zone of this country, we have land that are suitable for different crops, different farm produce. Are we utilizing them? There are certain things that cannot be grown in the south, you can grow it in the north, across the sixth zone. So, but I believe that government can at least focus on that. Let us rejig our agriculture. I am not advocating that we should start buying cutlass and hoes for our youth. No, far from that. But we can do some mechanized farming. Government can start looking at those rural areas. What can we do? You know, we are talking of rural urban migration. Nobody wants to stay in the rural area. Everybody is coming to the center. And when they get to the center, there is nothing, they have nothing to contribute. So government has to start thinking about what can we do to make some of these people to stay in the rural area where we have land, where they can be involved in agriculture. We need to look at the schools there. We need to look at our health facility there. So we look even the issue of electricity. Now there are, if you look around Akure here in recent time, we have seen people trying to build solar in their house and all that. Government can also look at that. We have some community. We can have a clusters of community in these farm settlement that we used to have in those days. Let us put some of this basic infrastructure there. It will energize them and they can also increase their productivity.
You know, one of the key things that Mr. Aluko said is that Nigerians are generally resilient and we're able to take in as much as possible. But with the way things are going, how much more do you think Nigerians can actually take?
Well, an average Nigerian is resilient, like you have said, and you gave that example when you were telling me about the cost, you know, that you used to purchase your things, groceries and all that, like as falling. Even as it is now, a pack of these noodles, you know how much it used to sell. If you were buying a pack before, I think one would have reduced it to a quarter or half by now. So this, and to that extent too, you know, they're still buying. It's just that you know, the quantity is reducing. It shows the resilience of an average Nigerian. But once and when this is overstretched, which of course I'm seeing and I'm foreseeing a situation right now, they might break. And at that threshold right now, there is a lot of it within it. And, you know, government is trying as much as possible, you know, to manage it and all that. But it gets to a point where man, just like Mr. Emmanuel Aluko said, that man has to survive, you know, in this kind of circumstances. And that's why you find out that implication has come upon criminality in the society. All this banditry, insecurity, and all these things we are talking about, they are the consequences of all this that's happening. Because, I mean, the first thing about man is preservation of his life, and the first thing he needs is food, shelter, and clothing. But all these are becoming more expensive for them, you know, to bear. So a point comes right now where we need that urgency. It reminds me of what happens in China then, and even in Singapore by Lee Kuan Yew, when they had this kind of problem. They closed the economy, and they asked themselves some basic questions. What is it that we need to transform this economy?
Some will say that, didn't we try that as well? There was a time we closed our borders and we said, let's begin to look inward. It's not
even the borders that I'm talking about right now. It could be part of it, but what I mean is the economic system that you are supposed to practice. And, you know, I gave example of 1985 when the structural adjustment program came. And it was supposed to be a model, you know, for us to follow. IMF was there, and World Bank was there. Every institution were there then to advise Nigeria on the way forward and on economic prosperity. But what we have down the line, you know, is reversed. Because right now, if we take the statistics of how far we have gone in terms of economic growth, yes, one might tell you might be growing without developing. And what we have right now on our hands, yes, even if they measure, and that's why they come with different statistics. They will tell you that, oh, by far, just about the diaspora remittances, for instance, is a figure right now that we are yet to even confirm, because the data, you know, is questionable. They will tell us that this is how much diaspora remittances have come in terms of dollars and all that. So data itself is a big problem. And because of all these factors, I think there is an urgency right now, because the international community, if, for instance, the Ukrainian and the Russian war right now has not in any way affected Russia as much as it should have. And it's just because they have an economy that is fashioned, and the infrastructure is fashioned on energy and gas over the years, which of course they have maintained, and they have become a monopoly of that particular produce. And because of that, no matter how it is now, they have been able to run this war all through. And a ruble in Russian currency, a unit of ruble right now, is as strong as even almost the dollar, despite the war and all that. Why? Why do they rely on the energy fight? So Nigeria should factor what exactly is the problem, and we know that the problem is that we are solely dependent on crude for a very long time. Even now that we are seeing that COVID and some exogenous reasons came up at the time, which of course right now is to the advantage, the comparative advantage of Nigerian economy. Now we're selling so much crude at a higher price. We're expected at this point to have so much profit, that would engender.
But we're still not even able to
yeah, because the reason is that other indicators and factors that are supposed to make that work aren't there. The dollar is strengthening as against the weakening of the naira.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Mr. Bankole. I would like you to assess one of the policies of the CBN regarding Forex, the raise to $200 billion in foreign exchange repatriation in 5 years, which was talking about has 5 major areas: value-adding export facilities, non-oil commodity expansion facilities, non-oil foreign exchange rebate scheme, dedicated non-oil export terminals, biennial, non-oil, all of that. How would you assess it, and what impact is that supposed to have?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, to assess it, I think the juries are there. We can see the result over the place. Are we okay? Are we better off in terms of our external reserve? I think the answer is no. In the last few months, even the external reserve has been further depleted. And don't forget that it is the strength of our external reserve that make the naira to be strong. So once we have issue, once the head of our external reserve is called to question, it will invariably affect the value of naira, because it is that external reserve that we use to fund whatever import that we are bringing into the country. So the truth is that we are not yet there. We have not gotten it right. I will be the first person to admit that managing macroeconomic is not a tea party. It's very, very complicated. There are so many things. You have endogenous and exogenous variables. There are things that are within your control. There are those ones that are externality that they are purely outside your control. So, but all you continue to do is to try to continue to do your best. But as it is today, I believe that we cannot give ourselves pass back, because it is evident that we are not getting it right as far as we are concerned. And like I said, economic system is not something that you just command. The economist does not obey command. It's not something that you just dictate to that, do this, that it will respond to that. No, there are so many issues that we have to bring into play. For instance, if you look at it recent year, for me, there are certain activities of the CBN that I have issue with. For instance, everybody know, and average economists know, that the job of the CBN is this monetary policy. Control of inflation and all the rest. It is the Federal Ministry of Finance that has to do with the issue of fiscal policy. But if you see what is happening in recent time, you discover that even the CBN is now going beyond their brief, which is the monetary policy. They have to look at the general price level in the country through their monetary policy. Now, the other aspect of it, which is the fiscal policy that you use to manage the macroeconomy, is within the domain of Federal Ministry of Finance, maybe Federal Ministry of Economic Planning and Budget, Ministry of Industry. So those are the level that we now look at how to manage the fiscal policy in terms of aggregate funding. And that is when you talk of budget of the government. You look at the what is the budget, what is the size of the budget of the federal government, because essentially that is what you can now use, the tools that we need to use to manage the macroeconomy. But you discover this day the CBN, which is supposed to concentrate its effort in the monetary policy, is now gravitating towards looking at look at the issue of ACO borrowing. They are now looking to agriculture. They are now looking at some other things that the CBN is not actually prime to target. So those are the things. So I don't believe that we are faring well as far as those policies are concerned, because if we are actually faring well, the results will have been out there for us to see. Like my colleague said,
so for you it's more like policies on paper that are not reflecting in our economy. It's not
reflecting in the average, in the life of the citizen there.
Because also another policy was talking about the need for manufacturers, for industries to be boomed, that doesn't, help them, encourage them by funding their obligations, opening up factories for them, finding, funding plans, facilities with only 5%,
interest.
But
it's good if we are doing that, but for me, what is important is the result. It is not what we said we want to do.
Because if this were really in place, so I think we wouldn't be talking about lack of industries, lack of presence.
It's just an aspect right now that we need to quickly talk about, and it's just a general phenomenon. What's about the corruptible tendencies in all of this? all these you have mentioned right now are very good policies, you know, but are they implemented the way they ought to have been? Why are they not? And what is the way forward? I think what we need more right now is the political will of the people in government to see that all these policies have been the same over the years. I remember that Mr. Emmanuel Aluko told you that, oh, when you read the introduction of how the CBN was formed, and in 1962 or that, he told you, no, this is just a very brilliant introduction and all that. And from then till now, the act is still the same. But the truth is that the implementation of this, for instance, if the governor of this, if the governor of the central bank of this country thought it in his own wildest imagination that he wants to become the president while in office as a governor, I mean, someone that is, you know, given that opportunity to manage the treasury, the monetary and the fiscal policies of this country, to regulate and to be bankers of bank and to be the lender of last resort. If all those are still there and we still find out that at the end of the day, such a person wants to be. So many things are happening right now. It's not as if on paper these policies are not good, but are they implemented the way they should have been? Then what is the will to make sure that all these things are resolved? We have the mineral, we have the human, we have the capital resource in this country to be where we are supposed to be. And there are countries that we can use as examples, you know, who have undergone this same process before, but they have turned around the fortunes of their economy and their country, and the citizens are better for it. So it is left for us right now to understand that, well, the economy is in doldrums. We've got out of recession in how many times right now, and we are still managing that economic recession until we have this COVID and all that. But the truth of the matter is that right now, the government should first of all see that borrowing at this point would lead us nowhere. Because if you're borrowing to consume, which of course has shown in the recurrent expenditure of this country and is overloaded, and the burden is so much on that economy, weighing it by the balance of payments, you see the receipt there is always in deficit. The budget itself is in deficit. GDP via the revenue, if you look at everything, the percentage is high. The unemployment rate is about 33% and above. The poverty ratio, that people are at the same time are within that poverty bracket, you know, that are supposed to be alleviated. All these programs are many more, are the things that are supposed to be done. Otherwise, when you continue to factor what dollar is to a naira, I'm afraid it might go as far as we have not yet seen. But if we do the right thing at the right time right now, which of course is an opportunity right now for Nigerians who wants to choose the next set of people to, you know, lead this country, they must look within themselves to find out that what we need basically is economic prosperity in this country. And that can only happen. We have all it takes right now. Naturally, they're there. But for us to be able to transform, you know, so we need an agenda of transformation in this country whereby most of these utilities, you know, will be transformed for the betterment of all. What's the standard of living? What's the per capita income? What are the indices that we use to, you know factor exactly a good and a viable society? All these are no longer there. Let the deficit in our infrastructures, let them be maintained, let them be corrected, let them be repaired, let people come up to terms with the realities that, look, if Nigeria is allowed to slide further into these economic woes and doldrums that we have been into, it might not be, it might not augur well for us. So by and large, we know conclusively that now that the dollar has given us how much it is as against the naira, and the naira keeps weakening more and more, what are we supposed to do at this point? Is it to borrow more at the expense of the dollar so that the naira will become more devalued? No. What we should do at this point is to close our economy, ask the economists that we have, what is the way out? What are the necessary things? Because you should now demarcate it in the short, medium, and long-term way, which, of course, the structural adjustment program has been. Let's listen to those banking, those institutions, like the IMF and the World Bank. Let's see what we can do instead of borrowing more and more, you know, and jettisoning the future of the oncoming children in this country into debt or indebtedness that they never worked for. Let's see what we can do. And Nigerians, you know, like we have said, most people are involved in all these corporate jobs in a way that rather than producing, you know, it's a static thing that they are not producing. Rather, they are maintaining the recurrent expenditure on whatever they do. So we should look into all
production
this.
Is the way
production now even involves much more than all we're talking about. Now the global economy is moving very fast and is dynamic. And we don't want to be left behind.
Follow suit. All right, Mr. Bankole, as we wrap up, what should we call a state of emergency on the economy as it is?
Well, I think you are not far from truth if you say that. And like I said, my colleague is talking that we should close our economy. I won't subscribe to total or blanket closure of the economy. Okay. Because we also need to trade.
No, I don't think that the economy should be closed in terms of discussing on what to do.
However, what we need to do is that there are certain things that we have the capacity to produce. We need to look at those items and stop bringing them into the country, because whatever we can do ourselves here and we are importing, it meaning that we are exporting the job we are supposed to create in our economy here. We need to trade with the rest of the world. For instance, even as the value of Naira is coming down, this is the best time for us to be able to export, because once the value of Naira is weakening, it makes export to be cheaper. For instance, if you are in abroad now, you are in America, you bring your dollar, you want to come and buy our good here. By the time you change it to Naira, you have more Naira with you. So it means that when the economy faces the situation we have in Nigeria today, it is good for export. It will make export to be cheaper. People can bring their money to come and export. However, what do we have to do that we can export? Unfortunately, we have none. Just like our Mr. Aluko said, for instance, yes, there is war in Ukraine now. All what's supposed to be a largest for us in terms of windfall, boom for our economy. Unfortunately, we cannot have them, because as we are exporting our crude oil, we are importing refined products. So those things that are supposed to have been a gain for us is not. So it's more or less like a double jeopardy for our economy. So we need to look at the structure of our economy. What are those things that we are able to? We have comparative advantage to produce those items. We should put them. We should not allow them to be brought to our country again. We should, for instance, when China started their economic development they are now, their currency was very, very weak, and it made their export to be cheap. So all over the world, people are coming there to buy things from them, and with that, the economy continue to improve. So the picture I am painting is that the value of Naira is bad. I mean, it's weakening. There are still some window of opportunity for us that we can capitalize on, which means that our export will be cheap, and people can come and export our goods. But the question we need to ask ourselves, what do we have to export? Virtually nothing. So we need to look at if we want to make this economy to be better, we need to look at it from the prism of agriculture. We need to have value chain. For instance, if you are traveling along our road during the harvest period for orange, we see a lot of our farm product getting damaged, wasted. We need to start looking at how we can start this small manufacturing. From there, we can grow up. When China started, everybody was saying that anything that you say is China. But today, they started from that level, and it has graduated. Now they have a product that can compete with the best in the world.
And they have presence across all countries.
Just to add it up to him, one of the things that I think we can export right now is human capital development. And Mr. Emmanuel Aluko made mention of it. Right now we are in the tech age. And you know that human capital development is a resource that can go anywhere in the world. Let our people be trained in technology, in ICT and all that. We see how fast that can be, because if we are still waiting to grow crops, to manufacture minerals and all that, yes, is a good way. But what do we need? And that's why I said the global economy is dynamic and is running so fast and mobile. We need to catch up with that. Most of these things needs to be done. Our educational system too, right now, must be towards enhancing such a career.
As good as what you have just said is, our university, they have been on strike for over almost 6 or more months now. So how do we build this human capital?
So we need a total overhaul of the economy.
And we hope that we get there. Many thanks to you, gentlemen. Mr. Olaoluwa Bankole, an economist and a legal practitioner. Thank you so much for being here on the
It's my pleasure.
And to you as well, Mr. Olaleko Olajubi. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, that's the size of the program this day, this week. Let's do this again same time next week. I'm Obi Chukwemeka Otis. Bye.